Good evening and welcome to a Wednesday edition of Buddy Martin Show. I am Buddy Martin. This show is heard 4 nights a week and sometimes on weekend. Check it out. We're coming up tonight. We're going to talk about what else in the world is there but recruiting. And of course, the 22 players Florida has in fold. We'll go over them with some of our experts, talk about that. And then we'll talk about the bigger picture later on with David Moulton. But coming up in just a second, Graham Hall, 247 Sports, and we're also going to have Nick Della Torre of Gators Online. So stay tuned, folks. Strap it on, ready to go. It's time for the Buddy Martin Show. Tell your friends and neighbors we are on the air.
Yes, it's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye!
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening and welcome to the program. I'm Buddy Martin. It's the Buddy Martin Show. And tonight on the program, we have some people going over with us the latest recruits who are inked and are signed and ready to go. And we'll tell you what we know and think we know. And not going to try to get into the areas we don't know because we don't know a lot. But we got a couple of people on who follow it closer, who know a little bit more. One of those, Graham Hall, the Minister of Information, will join us in just a moment. Also, we've got Nick Della Torre of Gators Online, who was at the press conference today, and some of our guys were there too. And shout out to Francis Beard, who had a little difficulty today getting up there with his car. Hope you're okay, Francis. And then it's a Wednesday night, and brought to you by our special guest segment, Titan MRI. David Moulton will join us for the big picture. David has a global view of things and a little more stable environment than us here in this world of orange and blue. So let's do this. Let's get ready for our first guest, Graham Hall. We'll hear from our sponsors. We'll come back. We'll start going over the list. What did you like about this class? Who's your favorite pick? Based on what you know. And let's be honest, we don't know much. Right back with Graham Hall after this timeout.
Jeffrey, what are you doing?
Well, I'm joining the band, of course. Since Meldon Law is the official law firm partner of the Florida Gators, I want to help.
Dad, we're litigators. Let's stick to helping people in the courtroom.
Well, can we still hang out and jam a little bit? At Meldon Law, we won't back down.
Absolutely. We're going to jam here tonight, going right to the orange and blue room. We're going to get in for just a few minutes. He's on the fly. He's the guy who's been with the program for a long time. Always good to have a member of the family back. The Minister of Information, where it is 247 Sports. We know that. And Graham Hall. What's up, my man?
Hey, buddy, doing well. Thanks for having me. It's always good to be here, especially on a day like today where there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. Let's get right to it. Let's don't waste any time with small talk. They got the 22 in. I listened to Billy go over every one of the guys. We know a little bit about what we think the transfer portal quarterback will be, but we haven't confirmed that. So looking at this whole thing right now, before we go breaking it down, give it a look and give me a thought and give it a grade.
Well, right now it stands at, by my count, 20 signees today. Then you factor in the addition of the transfer Caleb Banks at a position of need, really, the defensive line. I think that Florida has talked a lot, and I just wrote about this at Swamp 247. You can check it out. But the defensive line was absolutely a priority position in this class. We've talked often about the depth concerns, how Florida has already lost 2 guys to the transfer portal here in recent weeks. They lose Jervon Dexter to the NFL draft as well. this was a top position for Florida to sign, and they felt like they did a really good job here. Could a few things have been different? Yeah, could they have got maybe another outside linebacker, knowing how critical the jack linebacker position is within Florida's defense and along the defensive line especially. So this is a great group. I mean, Cameron James, Will Norman, some guys who really have played a variety of positions in high school, which is typical, and have some talent up front. You look at obviously getting Jaden Rashada. I'll go quick here to make sure we cover everything, but Jaden Rashada, that's a big one. I think quarterback is kind of an outlier at times where you don't necessarily need to stay within your radius, your footprint of whatever it is, 300 miles, where you're targeting prospects. You can go across the country, and that's what Florida did with Jaden Rashada, a guy who visited campus multiple times. They flipped him from Miami, as everyone knows. That's a successful thing for Florida. There was a little bit, I think, of anxiety, external anxiety, I got to say, because his letter of intent was the last one to come in. It actually hadn't come in by the time that Billy Napier was supposed to speak today at 4 p.m. They end up getting that letter of intent as he's waiting to take the podium, and then they can go up there with kind of the pearl of their signing class and that now 5-star on 247 Sports, that now 5-star signal caller. So that's a huge one for them. Certainly you get Trayon Webb, the Jacksonville running back. You get a lot of, I think, really good secondary players, whether it's Sharif Denson, whether it's Dijon Johnson, you name it. I think that this group has a lot of really good guys in it. Offensive linemen, they add 3 pretty good pieces there. I think that you'll see a lot of those guys. It's hard to always gauge how good someone's going to be coming out of high school at the offensive line position. I think there's a lot of variability when it comes to the talent there, but if all these guys are as hard workers as Billy Napier said today in his press conference, and a lot of them are going to get on campus, that's the last thing I'm going to say, very early here, which is huge for, especially when you're playing on the line, defensive line, offensive line, to start getting in shape, learning the playbook, and you have a chance to compete. I mean, look what Austin Barber did after his first year on campus. So if you can follow a similar trajectory, start getting in shape early, it really ups your odds of competing early, and that's what I think is a huge plus for this class that I haven't seen too many people say. You're going to get 20 early enrollees, kind of an unprecedented number. I know it has increased a whole lot moving forward, where you get upwards of 80, 75% of your players early enrolling. Rarely do you get around 90 to 95% of guys in your class to enroll early, and that's right where Florida is when you factor in getting Tony Livingston back from last year. Also someone who I think a lot of people forgot. He gray-shirted last year as he continued healing. I want to say it was a shoulder injury. Got back in shape, and now he's part of this signing class. So that's another one there that I think that maybe hasn't been included in as many tallies, because right now it sits at 22, 23 if you factor in, I know I said last thing already, but if you factor in the addition of Graham Mertz, the Wisconsin quarterback, Billy Napier talked about how many signal callers he'd like to have on his roster. So getting another one after Florida saw 3 guys leave after the season, that was another huge thing for this class that hasn't been counted in the official tally, because he's just committed with the class yet. So I know that was a long answer, buddy. But.
That's all right. I mean, look, I'm here for the answers. I want to hear just a couple of observations from afar without any knowledge. If I heard Billy and listened to it and read the story, whatever, is that you're not going to get dazzled by the 5 stars because there aren't any. But I mean, it's one Rashada. But I mean, the point is, it sounds like if you're looking for things to hang your hat on, you mentioned one, defensive line. He made a good point, big point, talking about the defensive commits and how much he liked them. And he addressed every player. So I will say this, and it sounded like, and someone made this comment earlier, that a way he talked about each player in the press conference indicates he has an individual relationship with these guys, each of them. He talked about their parents, their sisters, and he knew about them. They were just a name and a number. And I think that was one thing. The other thing was, I believe I heard, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that 17 of the 20 came from Florida. Is that right? Or at least, or Georgia or Florida. I think out of the 20, 3 were Georgia and 17 were Florida. That sounded right. Although with IMG, you don't really know. And then the other thing was that he addressed the needs in the size and speed. The offensive line he talked about in depth. He likes them a lot. There's some playmakers in there. So I can't evaluate this honestly, but it sounded like those are the points I hit on. Is it seems like he's going to bring some more players in. Now, they did not address the Mertz transfer, as far as I know, although Mertz says he's coming. And we can talk about why. And I think when you think about it, you got a young star coming up as a quarterback, you don't want to sit him right away. So it seems to me, just guessing here, knowing nothing, that Miller opens in the spring as a quarterback with the transfer portal guy, if it's Mertz coming in, them fighting it out. And then we got to see when Rashada gets ready. Will Rashada get ready by game 5 or 6 or 7? I don't know. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Talented guy. So that's my assessment. Am I anywhere close to being right on this?
Well, let me start with the personal relationships. I think that's a huge thing that Billy Napier has become known for. He recounted a story earlier in the season about how he used to call O'Cyrus Torrence every Thursday on his way home from work to make sure that he was keeping a constant line with him. And I think that that's been a consistent theme for a lot of these signees with Florida now, is that a lot of them credit the family atmosphere, the proximity, the closeness with the coaching staff. And you don't do that by just reaching out once a week. You really have to build a bond. When 17-year-olds are saying that as the first thing out their mouth when there's an $85 million facility down the door, and they're giving walk-ons meals here, when they have all the amenities here, and they're mentioning the coaches, I mean, that's just not fluff necessarily. That really, I think, speaks to what you just said, the personal connections. And it kind of is a shame, in a sense, not to kind of go on a different tangent here, but it kind of is a shame that we're in an era where head coaches have technically never had less power when it comes to getting someone's commitment, right? I mean, you used to show up and commit them hard, and if you were a top-tier program, top 5 public university like Florida is, if you were a coach.
Yeah, we're having no problem hearing you right up for some reason you're going in and out. I heard most of if I would use a word, and I didn't really know much about this class except what we read from 247 otherwise, if I was going to assess it, it seemed and felt like when Billy talked about these guys, it was authentic. He knew their families, he knew their little sisters, he knew about the players. It felt authentic, and he claims, he didn't use the term, but he handpicked these players. This is the ones he's going to go to war with. These are the guys that got to lead him to a good year, because if without a good year, you know what happens. He's got to get up there and be competitive to win 8 games or whatever next year, and then build his program slowly. So, looks like they got the makings if they can coach him up. Yeah, I'm having Grandma, I'll let you go because we lost you on audio somehow or the other. And thank you very much. Good job. Appreciate it, my friend. All right, sorry about the audio problems. All right, let's see if we can go right over to Nick Della Torre and see if he's got audio problems. And I know it's my fault, but let's see what we got here. Nick Della Torre joins us now from Gators Online, and that's not Graham. Hello, Nick.
Check. You got me?
You're good, buddy. You're good. So
there we go.
Yeah, gotcha. How you doing, Nick?
Tired.
Why? You haven't done anything.
Just need to catch up on sleep, that's all.
Thanks for being on. I know it's been a crazy day, but we're not going to keep you too long. I just don't know what you heard earlier from him. But just let me stop and say, give me your assessment of what you saw and heard. I heard your questions at the press conference, and what you saw and heard, what you learned that you didn't know, and what do you think about what you know so far on this recruiting class?
Yeah, so I think Florida has a good class. They're top 10 right now in our On3 rankings, and that's solid. There's nothing wrong with a top 10 class. That should be the standard at Florida, and I think Billy Napier, certainly Billy Napier with this, compared to last staff, is putting an emphasis on recruiting. The issue is you're in the SEC. So a top 10 class means you're 4th in your conference. You're behind Georgia, you're behind Alabama, you're behind LSU. And if you extrapolate that out to 2025, now you're behind Texas and Oklahoma, who are coming to the SEC. So I think the things are not mutually exclusive. Yes, it is a good class. You addressed a ton of needs. You have 3 really, really good receivers. Kelby Collins is one of the best players I think defensive lineman, and you went into Alabama's backyard and got a guy that Alabama wanted as a defensive lineman. You've got your quarterback in Jaden Rashada. You've got a bunch of defensive backs who I'm really excited about. I think Aaron Gates is really good. I think Jordan Castell is one of the most underrated players in the class. He's just a physical freak. But you need help at inside linebacker. Inside linebacker is dire right now. If you look at the roster, you need to. There's a bunch of places you need to hit the portal on. So while I think Florida's class is good, is very good, especially at certain positions, it's not closing the gap with Georgia. It's not closing the gap with Alabama. So it's a good first-year class, but you also need to start gaining ground on the teams that you're playing every year for conference championships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a question whether they can or will. There are two ways to look at this. You can get, and really today, Brian Kelly said it. You can look at it like we're going to go out and get all the best players we can get out of the transfer portal, or we're going to build a freshman and fill in the gaps. And that's exactly what Billy's doing. He's not getting that many. I mean, he probably should have gotten more last year and didn't. He's going to get players, and he's got confidence that if I heard him right in the evaluations they had of their players, what they thought in character, academics, etc., whatever you want to call it, his kind of people. And then if he coaches them up and they play as a team and he can get that concept across, he'll may have a better chance of being competitive. That's the thing, you want to be competitive. They're not going to go to the SEC championship this year, or this class, but they don't have to. They do have to get to the next level, which is whatever it is, 8 wins, 9 wins, and then the third year have a chance to be competitive. Now, he gets another class to do that. He has one more to go, and he does have a young roster, I will say. He wouldn't have graduated that many people. So that's the plus side. But you're right. When you look at it strictly with what's on the hoof and what the stars are, yeah, they're not at that level. Tell me the one player that excites you the most.
There's a couple. I'll go with one that maybe Billy talked about really highly, and it's a position that I don't know if you'll see him a ton next year. But Roger Kearney, who was an offensive lineman, they flipped from Florida State, listed at 6'4", 292. Billy said he has some of the best film, if you put his film on, some of the best film of any offensive lineman in the country.
Right.
And they're thrilled to have him in the class. I've talked to 2 coaches at the high school level, and then another coach who is not an on-field coach, but just scouts at a different school, not at Florida, and they agree with Billy. They think he has a high ceiling. This is a mauler, a kid that has all SEC type of potential. Now, is that in 2023? It's you make a lot of projections on the offensive line. I remember watching Martez Ivey up in Jacksonville and thinking, man, he's just 3 times the size of everybody playing against him. So I know he's a 5-star, but you're having to project because he's blocking a guy that weighs 215 pounds. So Roger Kearney's one as an offensive lineman who I'm really, really excited about. And then the other one, if I can steal and cheat and give you 2, Eugene Wilson.
That's the guy that excites me. That guy's got some scoots and apparently a heck of an athlete and can really change the dynamics of this offense, right?
Yeah, and not just the offense, but special teams. He's a guy that's going to be a kick returner, punt returner, slot receiver. And if you look at the roster now, I don't know that Ricky Pearsall will be back next year. To me, he's got a decision to make. And probably a lot of that, coming down to him will be, well, who the heck is throwing me the ball, buddy? I can't throw it to myself as a receiver, and if I'm trying to improve my draft stock, I need to know who's throwing me the ball. So, to me, Eugene Wilson comes in right away and will challenge Ty Bowman for that backup role as a freshman. So I think Eugene Wilson is one. He's not going to be an early enrollee, so he'll get a little bit later of a start. And you remember the days, buddy, when it was weird for kids to early enroll?
20 of them. 20 of them.
16 of the 20 high school recruits are early enrolling, and then you're going to have some transfer portal.
Right.
16 of 20. That is a significant number, especially when you said, as you just pointed out, the roster's going to be young. And I don't know how much faith. I think a lot of fans, signing day is like Christmas, and If you're a kid on Christmas, you might have gotten a toy on December 3rd, but that toy's done and you don't care about it anymore on December 25th. You've got a bunch of new toys.
The bright, shiny things, all those new things.
Yeah, there's no scuff marks, there's no scrapes or dings or cuts on them. New shiny toys are coming to Gainesville.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anyone on this roster will, on the signing class will be the savior for 2023. If I look at Florida's roster, which I think is going to continue to evolve with the transfer portal, even adding these 20 guys, they're going to be under the 85 scholarship limit. So there's plenty of room to continue to add. But I don't see Florida competing next year for against Georgia for an SEC East title or going to Atlanta. So how much can you get a guy like a Eugene Wilson or a Bryce Thornton at safety or a Jaden Rashada? How much can you get a freshman quarterback into the mix, especially when you look at the quarterback room and it might not be as deep or as talented, as Jaden Rashada's potential is. But you got to remember, he's still an 18-year-old kid traveling the entire way across the country, learning how to live on his own, let alone learning a new playbook and a new system and playing against SEC competition.
On the other hand, Nick, how many teams in the SEC will be able to compete with Georgia? Maybe two. So I mean, let's be honest about it.
Two from the West.
Yeah. So so that's one, and I get it. You're right about your assessment. I think expectations may have to be tempered a little bit. You look for the things. You look for the little hidden values, like the young squad coming up, like the players who seem to be. Billy thinks they're more committed, and they're kind of a brotherhood. They have a camaraderie going there that maybe we didn't see when Dan Mullen called them a bunch of independent contractors a couple of years ago. Maybe we're seeing that. But here's the elephant in the room, which we have not addressed and nobody else has. What about the quarterback position? Jack Miller, he looked okay. I mean, let's be honest to him. He didn't get a break. He didn't have time to prepare for that. There's some things about Miller, but I don't see him leading down to the promised land. Now, we've got a new name, which, by the way, has not been yet, to my knowledge, not announced by Florida. But we all know that Graham Mertz from Wisconsin. All right, now think about this. If I said to you 15 years ago, boy, it's exciting. Florida's got the Wisconsin quarterback. Unless it was, the Russell Wilson. It wouldn't have been to Wisconsin. But there's probably a method to that madness. I want to see what you think about this. They don't need, they'd like to have McCall or whatever, the guys, the kid from North Carolina coming in here. One that the Pitt coach says two people have offered $5 million to play, but they got a shot. They want to be able to bring him along, and they want to be able to not have a cluster. So maybe, I don't know, do you think maybe Billy's saying, just give me a serviceable guy that he be interchangeable with what we got in Miller, and this way it's developed Rashada, and maybe by the end of the year, before the Georgia game, our quarterback could be Rashada. Does that make any sense to you?
I don't understand or like the Mertz take. I think he's a less athletic Anthony Richardson. He had huge interception problems. I think 10 touchdowns to 11 interceptions 2 years ago. Last year, I think that number was 19 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Passing completion percentage is under 60, around 56, 55. I don't get it. And listen, Jack Miller was quarterbacking the Little Giants. Like, he wasn't quarterbacking the same team. You take out an All-American guard. You take out your best receiver. You take out a bunch of other pieces around you, a bunch on defense, which then affects the offense, just the way that the game flow goes. Jack Miller, I know fans were down on him after the bowl game, but I don't know what we expected out of Florida in that bowl game with who was available and under those circumstances. So, to me, Jaden Rashada has a really high ceiling. Strong arm quarterback, smart kid, great family. I don't think that he's ready next year. And if you're starting, let's say you start Jaden Rashada week 1, I think you might be a 6-6 team again. You might be a 7-5 team again. You're going to get massive growing pains with a freshman quarterback coming in and starting right away. I don't think it will be him. I think it's going to be a competition between Graham Mertz in the spring and Jack Miller, and whoever wins that wins it. And listen, if Jaden, it's not like the coaching staff is going to get Jaden Rashada here and immediately put a red shirt on it. He will have the opportunity to win the job. And if he wins it, then that means he's the best man for the job. I just don't think that that's realistic to expect of a freshman. So,
but Nick, here, you're the coach, okay?
Yep.
You got to make a decision. You got Miller coming back. You lost your whole quarterback room. You got to make a decision on a quarterback. You have a chance to get a 5-star recruit. How do you play it? What do you do? He says he wants 5 quarterbacks in that room, including also a preferred walk-on. So how do you play it? You'd like to get some of those super studs trained if you can get them. Sure. But I don't think if they could get them, I would be willing to pay $5 million, according to what Narduzzi says, for any of them for a year or two. I wouldn't think so. I mean, that's just me. So what do you do, Nick? How do you do it? How do you play this? What do you? I mean, I like your theory about Miller coming in, merchant, going at it, and see who's the best man. But I think they got to crack the door before Rashada, and if he's good enough, he needs to get on the field. That's my theory. Now, what would you do if you were Billy?
Here's the reality. I used to be a big guy in you need to give a head coach 4 years because you have to let them get their players in. Now with the transfer portal, the way it is, I don't think you get 4 years anymore. Billy just went 6-7 with 3 straight losses, didn't beat a rival. If you start a freshman quarterback next year and you go 6-7 and he looks mediocre, Billy Napier goes into 2024 on the hot seat. So you have to try to win games now. And I don't think if you have that mentality of we need to win games now, we need to be better than we were last year.
Oh, I agree. You got to try to win games now, but who gives you the best chance? Maybe Rashada does by games 8 or 9. I don't know. I'm not saying throw him in there.
And what I was saying is I don't think he does. Now, if he comes out and he wins the job, he's not going to be thrown into a closet somewhere and say, hey, we'll see you next year, when you're a year older. He'll be given the opportunity. And if he beats those guys out, then that's great. That's great for him, but there will still be growing pains. If it were me and I were Florida, I don't care how many guys I have. I'm still looking for more competition. There needs to be a wide open competition at quarterback at Florida. And if I can get another guy from the transfer portal, I'm doing it.
All right, real quick, we're going to mention a few names off the list. Just give me just quick comment, 2-word answer. All right, so let's talk about Jordan Castello. Billy talked about him a lot. Defensive back.
Freak.
Okay.
Freak. Physical freak.
Sharif Denson, defensive back.
Lockdown potential.
Aaron Gates, corner.
Loyal. The only guy that was committed to the Gators before Billy got there.
Couple wide receivers, Andy Jean.
Playmaker.
Aiden Mizell.
Fast.
We talked about Wilson already. I'll go with Wilson.
Electric.
Okay. And then a couple others. What about Bryce Thornton, the safety?
I like him. A little bit smaller, plays hard, and a really good kid. All the coaches up there in Alpharetta spoke really, really highly of him. So that was more than 2 words, but I'd only given you 1 word.
All right, that's okay. You did good. All right, let me leave it open for you. Now, mention anybody else that you'd like to and tell me why he gets you excited if he does.
I like Jaden Robinson, inside linebacker, just from up the road. Columbia
from Lake City?
Yep. I think Florida, just from a sheer need, Florida needs inside linebackers. I think you have, on scholarship, Derek Wingo, Shamar James, and I'm missing somebody. I think you have 3, and you play 2 at a time. So you don't even have a true 2 deep at inside linebacker right now, which immediately gives Jaden Robinson an opportunity this spring when he early enrolls to get reps and to get in right away. So that's huge for him, just in terms of opportunity. The other one I really, really love, I think one of the most athletic players in the state of Florida is Jakeem Jackson, a guy who Florida initially started recruiting as a wide receiver. He'll come in and play cornerback. He has speed, great hands. intelligent and instincts. This is a guy that I think Florida fans will know sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Billy said Jakeem Jackson, the receiver, just put on a show. Had quite a year. And here's one comment he made, and let's try to put it in perspective. I'll let you wrap it up with this. And thank you for coming on tonight. He says, think about this time last year. We are light years ahead. Agreed?
I don't think light years. I think everyone is kind of learning and growing through NIL. I think in terms of it probably feels that way for him.
To him it does, yeah, right.
Shoot, he got here and he had like 8 days, 10 days, whatever it was, until the early signing period, and he didn't have a staff yet.
Yeah.
So this probably felt easier to him. You've had, instead of having relationships for 3 weeks and trying to keep a signing class, this is a year, and then next year will feel even better because now you've had 2 years of recruiting these guys, and you've got your system in place, and you know it works. This year was still a test year. Like, hey, how do we run an official visit? How are we running unofficial visits? How are we contacting these kids? What are the kids liking about us? What are they not liking about us? You're still learning. So, yeah, I think it probably for Billy, it feels light years different just because it was probably easier this year, as easy as recruiting can get, which it isn't. But to me, the results are still good class. You got to start gaining on the teams that you're looking at the back of their jersey right now running the race.
Can you give it a grade, the whole class?
Yeah, I'll give the class probably a B+. I think there's you needed more linebackers. I would like to see another edge player, another defensive tackle, some interior defensive linemen. But in terms of skill positions, wide receivers, defensive backs, cornerbacks, and safeties, and a running back in Trayon Webb, I think your skill positions, you got a lot better.
Yeah. I kind of agree with your assessment, although I'd say up front, I don't really know much. Okay, I don't know much. All I can do is
make me feel good, buddy. Don't tell me.
No,
you're right.
I'm actually going from what you tell me and other experts because I don't follow it that closely. I can read other sites and other stories, and encrypt information and act like I know something. I don't know jack. Okay, including Miller. I mean, I don't know jack. So, but I'm just saying you have to kind of assess, and maybe you can tell a little bit about how Billy says it. Like, he was pretty excited about those 3 offensive linemen. Bryce Levitt and Rod Kearney, who said had the Najee Harris, and he said that the Kearney had the most impressive tape. Kearney did. So what do you know about Kearney?
Yeah, Kearney's really, really good. He had a really interesting recruitment. He was on a visit to Florida. I think it was his official visit to Florida, and must have still been in the car leaving the visit and committed to Florida State. And I thought, man, this kid just played Florida. He got a free visit, a nice hotel room, gets wined and dined and shown all around campus, and is still in the car with somebody from Florida and gets on Twitter and commits to Florida State. Credit to Billy and his staff. They liked the kid's tape. They built that relationship, and just because he was committed elsewhere, they didn't give up on him. It's tough to say when a offensive lineman will be ready. I think you're going to get a bunch of guys back. I think Ethan White's back. I think Michael Tarquin's back, and Kingsley Eguacon's back. So there's really only going to be 2 spots, and it's going to be a tackle spot and a guard spot open. Can a freshman come in right away, or is it somebody on the roster? I think Austin Barber probably takes one of those spots.
I would think so. Barber would be my guess.
And now you're looking at really 1 spot open. Can a freshman get into that group of 8, 9, 10? 10 being we'd love to have 10. Can a freshman break into that group? I think if anyone in this group can, I think it would be Najee, who at 6'3", 238, my goodness, I don't know what they're feeding him at IMG, but they fed him plenty.
Yeah.
And Roger Kearney, who's almost tipping the scales at 3 bills. I think those would be the 2 guys of the 3 that you might see earlier.
Haven't gotten into things like Cormani McLean and et cetera, but we'll catch you. Read him on Gators Online. He's one of the best. His Twitter account is epic. If you're not following Nick, you got to do that. Gators Online. Nick Thank you so much, my friend. And if I don't talk to you, Merry Christmas to you and your family. All right.
Hey, you have a beautiful Christmas, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Nick Delatorre from Gators Online, and right over to the other corner of the Orange and Blue Room, where he sits usually every Wednesday night, and we're glad of that. A guy who will speak to things like what's going on in Colorado with Deion and Cormani McClain, and from a more national and global perspective, here's David Moulton. How are you, David?
How are you, buddy?
You know what? I'm doing okay. I'm just struggling through the signing day, acting like I know what's going on, and reading names and thinking, well, that sounds good to me. What do I know? But nonetheless, it is always a big day for people who love recruiting. And as we know, we've made it sound like it's the only thing that exists in the world in college football is recruiting. And it is an important thing. But I know you sit there looking at what's going on in Gainesville and other places. Let me start out by asking you what you thought about Deion and about the fact he's already got his class in the 30s, supposedly, and that there's some thinking that Cormani McClain, a great defensive back who was committed to go to Miami, and now has changed his mind, is not going to sign. It looks like he's heading to Deion in Colorado.
Well, it's why he got the job. Mm-hmm. And it's why that many people thought that he could go to a Power 5 school and do this. Mm-hmm. And listen, they were 1-11. They need players. So I hope that he does have a good recruiting class. I hope he does have a good off season. And buddy, I think that now we have to start using that phrase for college football the way we use it for pro sports, because it's more than just signing day. The transfer portal is seemingly constant, and so you have to combine the two. And then you also have to keep track of how many of your guys do you keep. Like Dan Lanning at Oregon's pounding the table today saying, listen, not only did we have a good day today and we have a top 10 class, most people think, but we didn't have one freshman enter the portal.
That's good.
So that right, and that's that's part of the quote unquote off season nowadays. Nick had 20 guys enter the portal at Alabama.
That's amazing.
Right now, he then follows up with the consensus #1 recruiting class in the country. It will be interesting to see going forward. Does he keep having a ton of people? Jimbo's being criticized for all the people that entered the portal. Well, Nick had more. Of course, he didn't have a 5-7 season.
Yeah, that's it right there. Exactly.
Right. So, and it's an off season now. It really is. Mm-hmm. I just want to throw this out there, and maybe this is something we discuss early in 2023. Does this early signing period have to change? I'm a big fan of the early signing period. But if we're going to go to a 12-team playoff, and we're right smack in the middle of bowl preparation, all that, I mean, the Gators are getting pounded. I do other interviews on shows throughout the SEC, and they're, embarrassed by the performance that the Gators put forth against Oregon State. They're like they let the SEC down.
Yeah.
And I tried to say, well, first off, they had half a team. And secondly, if you're the coaching staff, let's be brutally honest. What's more important to you? Preparing the Las Vegas Bowl for Oregon State or trying to bring in your first full recruiting class? I mean, I might have spent an hour and a half preparing for the Oregon.
And they don't quite get that because the optics of it from afar look like this guy's trying to get in the ground. This is going to be a disaster in Gainesville. This guy's over his head. He's a Sun Belt coach. All those things are coming up. Now, look, I get it. Billy deserves some criticism because he didn't have a good year. But the national perspective sometimes is just a step behind what's going on.
Right. But also I thought it was a prime example of how the two worlds collide at the same time. And if you're Billy Napier and your staff with the roster that you had and the season that you had, like for Oregon State, that bowl game was really important. They don't have 10-win seasons very often. They treated that like it was the second most important game of their season next to Oregon. Florida probably wished they didn't have to play in the game, to be brutally honest. And
no
Oregon
doubt.
State would have played it every day of the week. So I wonder if going forward, and I'm a big fan of the early signing period, I'm almost wondering, does the early signing period need to be moved up to, I don't know, August, where these kids can commit before their seasons even start? Or do we do it? I just think that especially if we're going to go to the 12-team playoff soon, I don't see how this date works for everybody.
I would agree with you on that. I would agree with that. This is so confusing. A lot of people don't understand. One thing is that no transfers were announced today. Now, we know that Graham Mertz has said he's coming to Florida. No doubt a done deal. He's coming. I'm not terribly excited about getting a Wisconsin quarterback in here, but we'll see. Maybe he's the kind they need. I don't know. Someone who's serviceable, can run the offense. Now there's questions about, did they get a linebacker from Ohio State? Yes. According to what we read, not confirmed by Florida, they did get a linebacker from. Do you read about that, David? They got a linebacker from Ohio State as well. Yeah,
I have to admit, buddy, I'm taking a very hands-off.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah,
I'm going to try to wait until this is all done.
Yeah,
and then it's almost like reading the transactions page. I'm going to, then do the pluses and minuses and see who did well, who didn't, etc. Because even for the diehards who clearly are watching your show tonight because they want any and all bits of information on their future Gators, but it's more exhausting than ever to be a college football fan and keep track of your
It is, and that's why I wrote it last week about I'm kind of going to change my attitude after the last 2 weeks I've been through with, and the death of Mike Leach and my wife's heart attack and all the stuff going on. I'm thinking, why are we killing ourselves over this? There is good football played and fun to be had on a team that's not playing for a national championship. And now hopefully this 12-team playoff will help that a little bit, because, of course, there'll be angst over who will get in and who won't. But my point is that maybe we need to back off a little bit and say, what are we expecting here? All right, David, you've been covering football a long time, and I remember some really grand times covering teams that were 8-2. Went to a bowl game and 7-4 or whatever. Some of those teams.
Yeah, buddy. Those days.
I know.
Unless you
I understand.
All the way to the bottom,
I
those
know.
days are gone. Also, buddy.
But I don't have to accept that. I don't have to accept that.
I understand that, but I don't think you can have the money that you have now in the sport and be able to be that Pollyanna anymore. I mean, let's be honest. This is closer to the NFL than it was to college sports that you spent the majority of your life covering.
Right.
It is.
But you're not hearing me, David. I'm not saying that school should do that. Okay, I'm not saying that's what they should accept. I'm saying for fans to go through a season like this is exhausting and debilitating and disappointing. And that comes from what? Elevated expectations. But that's just my view of it. I don't expect you to agree with me, but I'm just telling you how I feel.
I got you. But I actually think fans want more information. They want to know more. They want to get closer. And we've bemoaned the lack of access that we now have compared to the access that we used to have.
I still feel that way. Feel that way.
So fans are trying to get, they're emotionally invested. And if you're emotionally invested, you want to know more. And they're not only emotionally invested, a lot of them are also financially invested, whether it's contributing, besides season tickets and what have you. So I think when you're financially and emotionally invested, you want as much information as possible. So also let's be honest, we emphasize winning now more than we ever have.
And that's what I'm saying. That this probably falls on us in the media. Well, that's all we talk about. We're obsessed with it.
Let me ask you this. Do you think at the University of Florida, the type of season South Carolina had this year, what'd they go, 8-4? But they had 2 monster wins.
And at the end of the season, I think it's a great year for them. It's fun.
Okay, for them. But is that a really good year, the type of year that you could really wrap your arms around, embrace in Gainesville?
Yes, because it came without expectation. Now, let's be honest. Look at the record of this team for the last 20 years. Let's look at the football that's been played since Urban Meyer was here. It's like they used to talk about Joe Namath when he was go out to bars and looking for girls. And he'd sit at the bar, and he'd get to be 12 o'clock, 1 whatever. He's still sitting there by himself. And he'd say, well, it's midnight, and Miss America ain't coming in through that door. Okay? I'm just saying that maybe it's midnight, Miss America ain't going to come through that door sometimes. And you say, okay, this is how it is. Does that mean that your life should be a disaster? Or you should throw up your hands and say, I quit this team, I want to pull for somebody? I mean, I'm talking about me personally and what I felt after this thing. I'm not expecting everybody to follow, or anybody to follow my lead. I just wanted to say it because I, as you, am a person who has a show and I write a column. And I've often, and listen, Mike Leach's life should have taught us something. There's a guy who touched so many people. And I never wrote about Mike Leach. I never met him. I never got to watch his team play, except on TV. And I'm hearing these fantastic stories. I heard one yesterday. This guy called from Texas. Real deep Texas voice, manly man kind of guy. And he says, well, I was in TCU over on campus one day, and I just had this new hot rod I got in. Had all this equipment on it, souped up, and this, that, and the other. I decided I'm going to drive by and see. I'll show this to Mike Leach. Like a coach is going to come out of his office to see a hot rod, right? So he tells the story. He says, I pulled up to the door, the campus. I went in, I knocked. I said, I'm here to Coach Leach. See Coach Leach. He said, what do you want? Well, I got a car out here I want him to see. And he described what it was. And so the secretary said, let me call back there. He called back there, and the other secretary, Leach's secretary, answered. He says, I just got this beautiful car here. I just saw a convertible, 1932, I don't know, all those Hemis, whatever it is. And I thought I'd just show it to Mike Leach, and maybe we go get a Coca-Cola. And she says, hold on a second. So she comes out and looks at the car and talks to him. And he says, wait here. In a few minutes, out came Mike Leach. And they did get in that car, and they did drive around. And Mike wanted to know all about it, ask questions about it. They did get a Coca-Cola, and they did go back, and what a 25-minute day. And this guy was deep, manly voice. And he broke up talking about it. He just broke up about it. And so I'm saying, here's these wonderful stories. I've missed those. I don't cover Mississippi State. I'm just saying sometimes we need to look for the other really good stories that are outside of just all about winning. That's all I'm saying.
Don't disagree. Don't disagree.
Anyway. All right, then I want you to tell them about, what have you heard now? People want to know about quarterback. Somebody said, ask Franz. Well, Franz is not on, so it's up to me and David. Is there another quarterback in the portal? I don't know of anybody but Graham Mertz that I know of. Billy did say he was going to get another preferred walk-on. He's got Miller in there now, and we have Rashada. He wants 5 total.
Okay, but if you're Billy, if Rashada you think is the answer, I don't think you want to bring in another one who's as good as Mertz or better.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, because Mertz is just a placeholder. Now,
I agree 100%. I said that before you came on the show. I agree. Yes.
Yeah, he doesn't think of himself that way. He thinks he's going to come to Florida and he's going to be Kyle Trask for 2 years. All right. And that he was held back by the Wisconsin system, and the Florida system's going to, show his true talents. And maybe that's the case. But I think right now, Napier is probably thinking, well, I can start off the year with an experienced quarterback, which is good because our first game is at Utah. So and I've got a tough early season schedule with Tennessee, Kentucky, the whole deal. It's probably good to have a veteran quarterback who's actually played college football. All right. And then whether it's later in the year or it's in 2024, we hand the keys to this car over to the 4-star kid from California, and let's see how far he can take us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, that story was, and I guess it was very shortly before he ended up having his massive heart attack.
Yeah, that's very sad. Very sad. All right, so let's talk about the national program. Saban did well, number 1 class. Once again, Georgia just reloaded. They got plenty. Anybody else jump out there for you?
And I do want to throw that out there, that has to be a little, it's, put it this way, buddy. If we were to do a poll question, what year do you think will be the year that the National Recruiting Services will think that Florida gained ground on Georgia? And the same thing could be asked of Tennessee and anybody else not named Alabama, LSU, or A&M, to be honest with you. When is it that you think you're actually going to start making up ground?
That's a very good question, and I agree with you on that. Let me say two things.
I mean, how disheartening is that Billy Napier pulled off
it takes time.
But also, if you're pulling off a top 12 class, and the first team you have to chase down is pulling off a top 3 class every year,
it's discouraging.
Yes, it really is.
But again, one thing we know, David, we've been around. Football is cyclical. It is cyclical. As the old saying goes, the sun don't shine on the same dog's ass every day. Things change. Already I'm hearing guys like, different guys talking about, well, Nick's done, Sycophorca, and there's always those guys. And coaches come and coaches go. And like Coach Spurrier says, every coach has an expiration date. All right, it does happen. But I think the excitement is watching him build his team. Billy's kind of an engineer. He's got this thing hopefully figured out. He wants to build it a certain way. This is just, will it work? I don't know. I mean, I like how he's done it, but will it be successful? I don't think he's going to be Georgia and win the national championship in the next couple of years, but I want to see him get competitive. And what I want to see are things with the team that, like, I want to see better clock management, better play calling, and certainly this high-priced defensive staff they got, they better get some ballers back there and make some stops on third down. Now, we have a right to accept that. When they can't do that, that makes people upset. But I think they're in good hands. As I was talking to Graham and Nick earlier, it's like he did handpick each guy. He knew every player's mother, cousin, wife. He observed them, he evaluated them, and he graded them for a lot of things. I think he said this is one of the brightest classes I've ever. Whatever. I know it doesn't matter unless he wins games. I get it. But so now we'll see if this system going to work. Dan Mullins didn't work. None of the M boys worked. So we'll see if he is. I think when you talk about, and I'll defer to you on this, when you're building a program, how do you go about building it? What would you do, David?
No, I endorsed his plan last year. Mm-hmm. His plan is the Saban Smart plan. It is. Mm-hmm. It's the same plan. All right? It's a huge staff, boots on the ground. Okay? We're going to do everything possible to recruit the best kids. They're in on 5 stars. They're not really getting a bunch of them yet. Well, it's stuff. It usually takes a couple cycles to start, flipping them. But now he's getting a large number of 4 stars. Okay, you can win a load of games with 4 stars. TCU's in the playoff. You think TCU's recruiting class is as good as the one Napier just recruited? Hell no. Okay, now he's playing an easier conference, but you know the point I'm making. Mm-hmm. So. And Kenny, if you ask how much distance is there between number 1 and number 8, it's usually the number of 5 stars is pretty much the difference there between number 1 and number 8.
Okay.
I mean, Nick got 6 of them today, Kenny. 6. Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I don't know who they're talking about here. Andy McIntyre says Kyle graduated and will be working in the business world. No longer on the team. Which team? The Bucks? I didn't hear that. What are you talking about there? So, anyway, all right. So how did you approach this story this morning on your show, Miller and Moulton, and how will you report it tomorrow? And do you feel equipped to be able to explain to your listeners tomorrow who is Graham Mertz and why is he going to become a Gator?
Oh, no. That's why we're having Bud Elliott from 24/7 Sports on our show at 7:30 tomorrow. No. I don't do this for a living. And I don't want to do it for a living. 20 years ago, I was nooks and crannies all in on this. And besides the fact that it's often not the best radio, it's exhausting. And now with the kids, who are committed since May, changing their minds 24, 48 hours beforehand, and it basically comes down to literally who's got the biggest check. No, I'll just, when it's over, I'll sift through all the information. And Buddy, I'm more interested in what the two deep looks like at spring ball and coming out of spring ball. Give me what the two deep looks like in August. That interests me. This is entertaining. It's killing the time. We've talked about it. The longest off season in major North American sports is the college football off season. We need this stuff to cling to. But let me just see what the two deep looks like in the third week of August. That interests me.
If you can get it. Yeah, that's another story.
Please, we can't even get rosters for bowl games as broadcasters. Honestly,
Yeah, really?
It's remarkable how these teams won't even give the networks who are handing over millions of dollars. They won't even give them a two deep, okay, so that they could start preparing graphics for the 4-hour infomercial, which is really what a nationally televised game is. I mean, it's a 4-hour infomercial for both teams.
Why do you think that is, David?
Because college coaches are the most paranoid, all right, and disturbed group of professionals in North America. I mean, they really are.
Yeah, I get it.
The National Football League releases all of this information.
Mm-hmm.
They release it all. In fact, they are ordered to. 90 minutes before every game, you are given the two deep by both teams. You are given a list of those who are activated, deactivated, moves, and what have you. They are ordered by the league to give it out. And yet college football operates as if literally World War III is hanging in the balance. If I let you know that a freshman from Lakeland is the backup slot guy. I mean, come on, honestly. And I really wish that the conference commissioners would get involved and say, you know, these networks are handing over hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Could we give them the necessary information so they can do a competent broadcast, please?
Well, who's in charge of that?
Yeah, well, it's the conference commissioners, and then it's the ADs. But here's the problem, buddy. The coaches run everything.
Of course they do.
Okay, and the coaches are staggeringly paranoid. Staggeringly paranoid. No offense, guys. You're not that important. This information isn't that important. Lighten up.
You're preaching my sermon, David. I love it. That's good. I agree with you. I will say there is some help in small corners. This has been one of my pet peeves for a while. I don't get involved in it as much as I used to when I was doing things on a daily basis. But I think there's some awareness now that you're just trying to do your job. And you can't do your job when you've got people in a position who are unqualified to be there and scared to death of their shadow and what the coach might say. He says, I only can do 21 minutes on a press conference. I don't want any more. And so you get to number 21 and 21 minutes. The guy says, let me ask you, and I say, time out. That's it. We get no more clock. We can't do this. That's the kind of crap that drives me crazy. We have guys who go drive 50, 75 miles to get up there and get in one question, and can't get it in. And I can go to the White House and eventually I'll get something in. You know, I just think it's in the people who are in charge have been made aware of that. And you cut your coach a little slack the first year because he's trying to, everything's more important than this. But at some point, you have to understand, David, and you do, you're a veteran, that when you're talking to this thing, you're talking to them. And they're the ones who support you, and they're the ones who are, you know, they're your fans. We're not doing this because we love doing it just to be around coaches. We're trying to fulfill a purpose here, to be informed somewhat. And by the way, I don't feel informed, so we can speak to the issues of things that are important to the fans. Is that too hard to understand, David?
Problem is they don't see it that way. First off, they see the media as the enemy. Also, as if they think the opposing teams don't know who's playing. I mean, no offense, they're watching your film. They know who's going to play. They know who sucks. They know who's good. They know who's going to play. All right? The only people that you're not telling who's going to play are your fans. All right? That's all. But, I mean, you know, And I know that most of the audience is going, a bunch of media guys complain
Oh, yeah.
about something.
No
We're
doubt.
just
No
trying,
doubt.
honestly,
I
I'm
don't
just
care.
trying to serve you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't. Honestly, makes no difference to me at all. But I know it matters to you because I get your texts, I get your emails, I get your angry phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I'm just trying to give you the information. And trust me, we can't get it.
It's
Basic
okay if I put
information
it's
we get.
okay if I put out if I put your home number up there. Isn't it? Okay. Hey, let me just give you this.
Very, very quickly.
Yeah.
When I worked at a station in Fort Myers in which I also did sales. And so because of it, when you do sales, sometimes business people call the front desk and they're looking for your phone number, how to reach you.
Right.
And so listeners found out, somehow the word got out. And so listeners started calling the front desk, getting my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started getting calls at all hours of the night. Usually it was, good meaning, but sometimes it'd be 2 a.m. and it'd be telling me how much I sucked. And, but usually it'd be like 11 p.m. and it'd be like, hey, we got a trivia question.
Yeah, I went to the bar here, and Joe says this, and Joe said, I want to sell it. Yeah, for sure. Hey, one thing I want to address before we go, and I do need to get my commercials in at some point tonight, is the sad story of Franco Harris.
Oh.
What a terrible. I had a chance. I was thinking about. I forgot totally about this until he died today, at age 72. On the same week they were honoring him for the immaculate reception. They were retiring his jersey this weekend. Talk about bad timing. Oh my gosh! And he died. And I was thinking, when I worked in Denver, I was writing a column for the Post, and I think the Broncos were going to play them down the road. I decided to go to Pittsburgh during the middle of the week and try to get an audience with Franco. And the guy there was great. He was great on the PR guy. And they said, yeah, come on, you can come in Friday afternoon. It'll be a light workout. And we'll go back to the locker room. Franco likes to cook stuff. He'll cook something probably. So sure enough, I went to the locker room as came in from practice. Franco got his crock pot over there, whipped up some meatballs, and we ate meatballs and talked. It was just a wonderful time. I thought, how could I ever do something like that today? That doesn't work well at a Zoom conference, right? You don't get to eat meatballs. I thought, boy, have things changed. But R.I.P. to Franco, one of the greats, a hell of a nice guy. And by the way, someone said today, well, that's one of the most famous. No, that was voted the most famous play in NFL history. My man Terry Bradshaw talked about it in his book, and we've had many discussions. So that's a sad time for Franco and his family.
And if you've never been to Pittsburgh, the significance of the play, if you fly into the Pittsburgh airport when you're making your way down, whether it's to get your luggage or to just leave, by the time you get to the last right before the last escalator, there is a huge statue of Franco bending down, catching that ball inches off the ground.
Yeah.
And the reason it was so significant is that it was the first ever playoff win in Pittsburgh Steelers history.
Yeah, beat the Raiders.
The Steelers were an absolute laughingstock, and they made the playoffs, but they won the game. And it was the beginning of the dynasty.
Yeah,
and it meant so much to that area, that play, even though they lost the next week to the undefeated Dolphins. But we all know what happened then thereafter. And so that's why he, in that moment, plus he stayed in Pittsburgh.
He did.
For the rest of his life after his playing days were over. Played at Penn State, played all but half a season of his career at Pittsburgh. And it is sadly ironic that, first off, this weekend was really going to be the culmination of his life.
Yeah.
Okay, and that the good Lord couldn't give him 72 more hours. But also, the Steelers, with all those legendary Hall of Famers, I think this was only going to be officially, the third number retired in Steelers history.
Wow.
They've got about 10 numbers they haven't given out, including Terry's and Blunt and Palomalu and what have you. But the only two numbers I believe that have been retired officially in Steelers history is Ernie Stoutner and Mean Joe Green.
Wow, yeah, 75. Yeah, Very good. Well, David, listen, Merry Christmas to you and your family up in your new home in Jacksonville. I hope
Buddy,
you have.
I hope all is going as well as possible for
Thank
your
you.
wife.
Thank you very much. And it is. And appreciate that, David. Thanks very much and happy holidays. Talk to you next week. The great David Moulton. All
Merry
right.
Christmas,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, David. All right. We always love having David on, and I get so involved in it, I forget to run my commercials. Let's do this. Let's hear from our folks who sponsored David, Titan MRI.
Things have certainly got a little out of hand lately when it comes to just buying our everyday necessities. Just look at gas, streaming services, and heck, even chicken wings. Well, there is one necessity that shouldn't cost a ton: taking care of yourself and helping fix all the aches and pains in life. And the fine folks at Titan MRI agree. With costs a fraction of what you'd pay at a hospital, you'll not only save money, you'll be taken care of by staff with over 20 years experience. So when you need an MRI, call Titan first, and you can go where your doctors send their families. Now offering CAT scans.
All right, thanks very much, Jeff Cardoza, and thanks to Titan MRI for sponsoring this segment with David Moulton. Also, thanks to all of our sponsors and to our guests, among them Rinstar Medical Research, which is a very special group of people to us because they've been our sponsors and friends for a long time. And they do a terrific job, not just on this program as sponsors, but also in our community. They are downtown stakeholders. They have a reputation as a high-quality, patient-centered clinical research facility, bring cutting-edge clinical research trials to Ocala in areas like Alzheimer's, psoriasis, osteoarthritis, migraine, and fibromyalgia, along with many other conditions that affect our community. Rinstar Medical Research, you can check out if you want to be part of the clinical trials. Go to rinstar.net. Seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching, folks. Back at you tomorrow night with Orange and Blue Bloods with our team. We'll have our regular guys on, including Franz and Ben and probably Lauren. Lots more coming away right tomorrow night. Take care.